Blue and red lights painted the cracked pavement as the patrol car screeched to a halt. Neighbors peeked through curtains, phones raised, recording. Amara Johnson stood frozen on the sidewalk, grocery bags spilling at her feet, her son clutching her hand. 2 officers stepped out, their laughter already loud before a word was spoken. "Well, look at this," one sneered, circling her like prey. "Another loudmouth who thinks the law doesn't apply to her." The other smirked as he pulled out the cuffs. "Hands behind your back. Don't make us drag you." "I haven't done anything," Amara whispered, her voice steady but trembling. "Save it," the first one barked, shoving her toward the hood of the car. Metal bit her wrists as the cuffs snapped shut. The officers laughed, one even shaking his head. "Thought you were somebody? Stay in your place." The crowd chuckled nervously, phones recording every second of her humiliation. Amara met their eyes, not with fear, but with a silent fire that none of them recognized. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She stood in silence, her dignity unbroken, even as they pushed her into the back seat like she was nothing, and then, as the cameras rolled, a narrator's truth cut through the noise. They laughed when they cuffed her. But what no one knew was that one day, those same officers would stand in her courtroom and fall silent when she sat above them as their judge. Amara Johnson's life was stitched together by long hours, aching feet, and a dream most people around her dismissed as impossible. In her mid-30s, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that belied the exhaustion she lived with every day. By dawn, she worked in a small diner, pouring coffee for men in suits who never learned her name. By night, she pushed a cart through office hallways, cleaning the spaces where power was brokered. Between shifts, she sat at her kitchen table, textbooks spread out, her son's homework stacked beside her own. She was a mother first. Her son, Malik, barely 12, was the anchor of her world. He was bright, curious, and already too aware of the unfairness around them. Sometimes he would watch her with worried eyes when she fell asleep over her case studies, a pencil still in her hand. Amara would smile through her exhaustion and tell him, "One day, all this work will matter." Her dream wasn't just about a better paycheck. She wanted to be a judge. She wanted to sit in the very place where too many people who looked like her had been condemned unfairly. She wanted to prove that justice could be more than a word, that the law could finally protect people like her son. But not everyone saw her fire. To the police who cuffed her that night, she was just another black woman they could humiliate. To neighbors, she was the single mom working too many jobs. To most, she was invisible, and yet behind that invisibility burned a relentless determination. Every insult, every dismissal, every long night only sharpened her resolve, because Amara knew what they didn't. The very system that mocked her would one day answer to her. The city Amara lived in was a place of extremes. Downtown gleamed with glass towers, polished lobbies, and marble courtrooms where lawyers in tailored suits argued over millions. But just a few miles away, the streets cracked, the lights flickered, and patrol cars prowled like predators rather than protectors. In those gleaming towers, power was traded with handshakes and signatures. Judges wore robes that carried more weight than entire neighborhoods. Police strutted through the streets as if authority gave them immunity. For the privileged, the system worked like a shield. For people like Amara, it worked like a weapon. The culture inside the police force thrived on arrogance. Jokes laced with casual racism passed around like cigarettes. Arrests were badges of pride no matter how baseless. Accountability was a word rarely spoken, and even when spoken, never enforced. Their laughter that night when they cuffed Amara wasn't new. It was routine. And yet, in this city where lines were drawn so sharply between privilege and struggle, Amara carved out her fragile space. She pushed cleaning carts through court hallways, sweeping the floors of rooms where verdicts decided futures. Sometimes, after her shift, she sat quietly in the back of hearings, absorbing every word, memorizing the rhythm of justice. She was invisible to the judges and lawyers passing by, but she was learning. This was the imbalance of her world. The powerful stood untouchable at the top, laughing while she scrubbed their floors. But beneath their notice, she was building something greater, an understanding, a patience and a strength that would one day shatter the divide. Because Amara wasn't just cleaning those hallways. She was walking toward them. It started on an ordinary evening, Amara had just finished her shift at the diner, Malik by her side carrying a bag of leftover bread the cook had given them. The streetlights flickered as they walked the few blocks home, the city's hum fading into the rustle of their footsteps. Then came the flash of blue and red. A patrol car pulled up, tires screeching. 2 officers stepped out, grinning as though they had stumbled upon entertainment rather than duty. "Evening," one drawled, circling her like a wolf. "Where you headed in such a hurry?" "Home," Amara answered softly, holding Malik's hand tighter. The second officer tilted his head at the boy. "What's in the bag?" "Stolen bread?" He laughed, nudging his partner. Amara stiffened. "It's from my work. I'm a waitress." But they weren't listening. One grabbed her arm roughly. "Hands behind your back. For what?" Malik cried, panicked. "She didn't do anything." "Quiet, kid," the officer snapped. He twisted Amara's arms, metal cuffs clamping down. Her groceries spilled across the pavement, apples rolling into the gutter. The officers chuckled, one muttering, "Stay in your place. Don't make us drag you." Phones lifted from windows and sidewalks, recording every second. To the crowd, it was just another scene, another black woman humiliated in the open. Amara didn't scream. She didn't resist. She looked straight ahead, her silence louder than their laughter, her eyes burning with a defiance none of them understood. By the next morning, the video was everywhere. "Single mom cuffed for nothing," headlines mocked. Comment sections filled with jeers and pity. Strangers argued over her humanity as if it were up for debate. Malik sat at the kitchen table, eyes wide with confusion and hurt. "Why, Mom?" he whispered. "Why did they do that to you?" Amara had no answer, but deep inside, a vow formed. This humiliation would not be the end of her story. It would be the beginning. The charges against Amara were thrown out within days. There was no evidence, no crime, no reason she should have been cuffed at all. But the dismissal didn't erase the humiliation. The video had already gone viral. On street corners, whispers followed her. "That's the woman from the video." At the diner, customers smirked and pulled out their phones, pretending to film her again. Even at Malik's school, parents eyed her with pity, or worse, judgment. "She should have just kept quiet," one muttered as she walked past. The police officers faced no consequences. Their report listed vague words like suspicious behavior and non-compliance, enough to close the case. They went back to patrolling the same streets, laughing with the same arrogance, untouchable. Amara tried to bury herself in her work, but the weight of shame clung to her. Nights were hardest. Lying awake, replaying the laughter, the sting of the cuffs, Malik's terrified face. One evening, she found him sitting at the table staring at the homework he hadn't touched. "Why didn't anyone protect you?" he asked, his voice cracking. Why didn't anyone stop them? The question pierced her deeper than the cuffs ever had. She reached for his hand, struggling to steady her voice. "Because sometimes the world doesn't see us the way it should." Tears welled in his eyes. "Then I don't want to live in that world." Her chest tightened. She had spent her life enduring, quietly swallowing insults, shouldering burdens, surviving. But Malik's words lit a fire she hadn't felt in years. She couldn't let him grow up believing silence was survival. The next morning, she pulled out her law textbooks with new determination. Each page she turned was no longer just for herself. It was for him. She would not be powerless again. The world might mock her, dismiss her, laugh at her, but she would climb anyway. Because one day, she promised herself, the same system that cuffed her would have to face her on her terms. And when that day came, she would not bow her head. Amara's life became a relentless cycle of exhaustion and grit. Every morning started before dawn. She tied on her apron at the diner, served coffee with forced smiles, then hurried Malik off to school. After work, she rushed to her night cleaning job, pushing her cart through polished office hallways, her earbuds whispering recorded lectures on constitutional law. And when the rest of the city finally slept, she sat at her kitchen table, textbooks spread wide, the lamp flickering as Malik dozed beside her, homework still in his small hands. The laughter of those officers haunted her, replaying like a cruel echo. But instead of crushing her, it became fuel. Each jeer reminded her of the stakes. Each smirk reminded her of her vow. Still, the road wasn't kind. Law school was a battlefield. Professors eyed her with skepticism when she struggled to stay awake in class. Classmates whispered about the older single mom who didn't fit in. One snickered, "She's probably here because of that viral video." Every time, Amara bit her tongue and pressed on. Bills piled up. Rent notices slipped under the door. Malik grew frustrated watching his mother burn herself thin. "Why do you keep doing this to yourself?" he asked one night, tears streaking his cheeks. "They'll never let someone like you win." Amara cupped his face, her voice hoarse but steady. "Because if I don't, then they've already won." The humiliation followed her. At a school fundraiser, she overheard two police officers joking near the food stand. "Hey, isn't that the lady we cuffed? Heard she's trying to be a lawyer now." Their laughter was low, cruel, designed to cut. Malik heard it too. His fists clenched, but Amara only straightened her spine. She would answer them in a place where their badges meant nothing. A mentor emerged in her struggle. Judge Carter, a retired jurist who sometimes volunteered at her law school. He saw the way she stayed late in the library poring over case law until her eyes blurred. One evening, he stopped by her desk. "You've got the fire," he said, voice low and deliberate. "But fire alone won't win. Justice is patient, steady. Keep walking. They'll underestimate you until the day you're holding the gavel." That night, his words replayed as she studied into the early hours. Malik curled up on the couch nearby. She scribbled notes furiously, whispering statutes under her breath, as if carving them into her soul. The ridicule didn't stop. Online, the video resurfaced during her bar exam prep. Memes circulated again, from cuffs to court. Not likely. She nearly broke under the weight of it, staring at the hateful comments the threats sent to her inbox. But alongside the cruelty came something unexpected. Support. Strangers wrote messages like, "Your strength gives me hope." Community groups rallied, whispering her name like a promise. Each night, she asked herself the same question, will they ever take me seriously? Each morning, she answered by opening her books again. The suspense built with every step of her climb, every exam, every rejection, every mocking laugh. She had nothing but her will. Yet, that will grow sharper, steadier, unshakable. And though she didn't know it yet, the very men who once cuffed her would soon sit across from her, not as enforcers, but as defendants. The loop was wide open. The world was waiting. Could Amara truly rise high enough to turn the tables? The closer Amara came to her dream, the heavier the shadows pressed against her. Every time she inched forward, something dragged her back. During her final year of law school, the old video of her arrest resurfaced again, this time on a larger platform. A blogger wrote a mocking article, "From Cuffs to Courtroom, The Delusion of Amara Johnson." The clip was edited to show her humiliation on repeat, the officer's laughter ringing louder than her silence. Her inbox flooded with ridicule. "You'll always be the one in chains, never the one in robes." Others sent uglier threats. "We'll see how long you last before we put you back where you belong." She tried to focus, but whispers filled her classes. Some classmates defended her, inspired by her resilience. Others muttered that she was chasing a fantasy. Even professors doubted her composure. One bluntly told her after class, "Your story is sympathetic, but law is a game played by those with power. You'll find doors shut where others find them open." Amara carried these words like weights. And yet, in the same storm of mockery, something new began to bloom. Community leaders began inviting her to speak at local gatherings. Civil rights groups shared her story. "If she can endure, so can we," one post read. Accompanied by her image, eyes lit with fire as she spoke to a room of struggling students. The world was split, half waiting for her to fail, half pushing her forward, but the pressure only sharpened. On the night of her bar exam results, Malik found her sitting at the kitchen table, head in her hands, shaking. What if they're right? She whispered, her voice cracking. What if all this was for nothing? Malik placed his hand over hers. "You told me once that silence lets them win. Don't be silent now, Mom. Not when you're this close." Her results arrived the next day. She had passed. Still, the path wasn't smooth. Her early years as an attorney were riddled with resistance. Officers who recognized her sneered outside courtrooms. Some cases were sabotaged by lost files or sudden procedural delays. But with each hurdle, Amar grew tougher. She spoke less, observed more, and moved with the steady precision of someone who knew her day would come. And when her nomination for the bench was announced, the city exploded. Headlines clashed. From handcuffs to judge's robe, critics called her unfit, citing her viral arrest. Supporters hailed her as proof that justice could rise from injustice. The suspense twisted tighter. The very system that once mocked her now prepared to place her on its highest seat. And lurking in the shadows were the same officers, still laughing, still arrogant, never imagining they would one day walk into her courtroom. The nomination hearing left Amara drained. Questions from the panel probed her background, her arrest, her single motherhood. Some masked skepticism with politeness, others didn't bother to hide their contempt. That night, she sat at her kitchen table in silence, staring at the rejection letters from years past that she still kept folded in a drawer. Malik, now a teenager, slid into the seat across from her. He studied her face carefully before speaking. "They laughed at you again today, didn't they?" Amara sighed, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "They don't think people like me belong in those chairs. They want someone polished, born into this world, not someone who scrubbed its floors." Malik's jaw tightened. "So prove them wrong. Isn't that what you always tell me? That respect isn't given, it's taken." Her eyes softened, though her voice trembled. "I don't want to be consumed by anger, Malik. Justice isn't vengeance. It's balanced." Across the city, whispers rose in police precincts. Two officers sat in a bar, glasses clinking, watching her speech replayed on the news. "Can you believe this?" One laughed. "We cuffed her like a stray dog and now she wants to sit on a bench and judge us?" The other smirked. "She'll never last. People like her break." But Amara had learned to hear these words without flinching. Later, in the quiet of the courthouse library, she found Judge Carter waiting. He placed a heavy hand on her shoulder. "You're carrying more than the law, Amara. You're carrying every voice that's been silenced." He leaned in, eyes sharp. "But remember this, truth without proof is dangerous. They'll tear you apart if you only come with anger. Walk in with evidence, patience, and dignity, and they won't be able to touch you." Amara closed her eyes, hearing again the echoes of those officers' laughter, the steel bite of cuffs on her wrists. She opened them with new resolve. "They think my silence makes me weak, but silence taught me to listen, and listening taught me exactly how they fall." That evening at home, Malik asked softly, "When will they stop laughing at us, Mom?" Her gaze steadied on him, her voice calm as iron. "When I'm the one holding the gavel." For the first time, Malik smiled without doubt. "Then I can't wait to hear it slam." The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the benches. Cameras hovered just outside the doors, and whispers rippled like electricity. Everyone had come to witness the spectacle. Amara Johnson, once dragged through these streets in handcuffs, now robed in black, seated on the bench as the city's newest judge. The bailiff called the case. Two officers shuffled in, their confidence loud in every step. They were being tried for brutality against a young man whose arrest had gone viral. Beaten, mocked, cuffed for nothing. And when they saw who presided over the case, their smirks faltered. Silence fell. Amara's gavel struck once. "This court is now in session." The officers exchanged a glance, their arrogance flickering. Only years ago they had laughed while cuffing her on a street corner. Back then, they thought her silence meant weakness. Now, that silence commanded the room. The prosecution began, presenting footage of the arrest. Gasps rippled as the brutality played out on the screen. The officers squirmed, their earlier bravado dimming. Their lawyer objected, tried to redirect, but Amara's calm, steady voice cut through. "Overruled. The evidence stands." One officer broke under cross-examination, his words unraveling. "It was procedure," he stammered, sweat beating at his temple. But the video showed otherwise. Mockery, cruelty, fists where there should have been none. Amara's eyes never left them. She didn't raise her voice, didn't gloat, didn't remind them of that night when their laughter rang out under flashing sirens. She didn't need to. Her very presence was the answer to every insult they'd ever hurled. During closing statements, their attorney sneered, "Your Honor, with all respect, isn't it possible bias clouds this courtroom? After all, you have history with these men." The gallery stirred. All eyes turned to Amara. She leaned forward, her tone sharp, deliberate. This courtroom does not serve personal grudges. It serves justice. And justice has no bias against the truth. Her words silenced the chamber. When deliberation ended and the verdict was read, guilty, the air itself seemed to shift. The officers slumped, their smirks gone, the weight of accountability crashing down on them at last. Reporters scribbled furiously, headlines already forming, from handcuffs to gavel, Judge Amara Johnson delivers justice. Amara raised her gavel one final time. Her voice carried through the chamber, calm but unyielding. "Do you still think I don't belong here?" The gavel slammed. The sound echoed like thunder. The courtroom erupted, not in laughter this time, but in awe, in silence, in respect. The verdict spread faster than wildfire. By the time Amara left the courthouse that evening, her name was already a headline on every major outlet. Once humiliated, now delivering justice. Clips of the courtroom circulated online, her steady voice overruling objections. The officers' stunned expressions as the guilty verdict rang out. The thunderous slam of her gavel. On the same streets where she had once been cuffed, people now whispered with pride, not pity. "That's her," neighbors said, pointing as she passed. "She's the judge now." For many, her rise felt like their own victory, a symbol that silence could turn into strength, that invisibility could become an undeniable presence. At home, Malik was waiting by the door. He didn't rush into her arms. He stood still, wide-eyed, soaking in the sight of his mother, not just as the woman who held their fragile world together, but as someone who had changed the world itself. "You kept your promise," he whispered, voice breaking. Then he hugged her fiercely, his pride radiating stronger than any headline. But even as support poured in, ripples of anger spread among the old guard. Some police unions muttered about bias, certain circles whispered about making an example of her. Yet none of it could erase the image the public had already embraced, a black woman who rose from handcuffs to command the bench. The officers who once mocked her now faced years of accountability. Their laughter had died in the silence of her courtroom, and in that silence, something greater had been born. A shift, a reminder, a story that would not be forgotten. Amara stood by her window that night. Malik asleep in the next room, city lights flickering beyond the glass. She thought of the cuffs, the laughter, the shame, and then of the gavel in her hand. For the first time, the weight she carried felt lighter. The guilty verdict was only the beginning. Within weeks, appeals were filed. The officers' lawyers painted them as victims of circumstance, twisting the narrative. Overzealous judge with a personal vendetta. Headlines clashed, some praising Amara as a symbol of resilience, others questioning her impartiality. It was a storm she had expected. Power rarely fell without resistance. In the appeals hearing, their defense leaned heavily on her past. "Your Honor was once arrested by these men. Surely her rulings are tainted by bias." The courtroom buzzed. Cameras zoomed in, waiting for her to falter, but Amara's response was steady. "I was not on trial in that courtroom. The evidence was." The verdict came not from memory, but from fact. Justice demands no less. Then came the witnesses. The young man they had brutalized, his voice shaking as he described the night of his arrest. Medical reports, body cam footage, testimonies from bystanders, all converged into a picture no amount of spin could erase. Even the community, once silent, filled the gallery with quiet support, their presence louder than chants. The appeals court upheld the guilty verdict. The officers were stripped of their badges, their careers shattered not by vengeance, but by truth. For Amara, the victory wasn't personal. It was symbolic. She hadn't just defended herself. She had defended every unseen person mocked, cuffed, and dismissed. When she walked out of the courthouse, reporters swarmed. One shouted, "Judge Johnson, how does it feel to finally have justice?" She paused, her robe swaying in the evening breeze. "Justice isn't about how I feel. It's about what's right." And tonight, the system proved it still can be. Behind her words lay a deeper truth. They had tried to define her by her humiliation, but she had rewritten her story in the language of law and dignity. The cuffs were gone. The gavel remained. True justice isn't about revenge. It's about restoring balance. Amara's story proves that strength is not found in the loudest laugh or the heaviest hand, but in the patience to endure and the courage to rise when no one believes you can. When the police cuffed her, their laughter carried the weight of generations of arrogance. They thought her silence meant defeat, but silence can be powerful. It can listen, it can learn, and when the moment comes it can speak with more force than any shout. Amara's journey from humiliation to honor is more than a personal triumph. It's a message to every underdog, every overlooked soul, every voice told it doesn't matter. True power doesn't come from uniforms or badges, but from dignity, persistence, and the refusal to let others write your ending. The cuffs that once defined her became the spark that forged her resilience. And when she sat in judgment, she didn't need to gloat or strike back. Her presence alone was proof that underestimation is the greatest mistake power can make. Her story reminds us all. The people you mock today may be the ones holding the gavel tomorrow. Months after the verdict, Amara's life found a new rhythm. The courtroom that once symbolized humiliation now stood as her domain of authority and fairness. Each morning, she walked through its doors with Malik at her side. No longer the frightened boy who had watched his mother in chains, but a proud young man who carried himself taller, knowing who she had become. Amara didn't let her victory end with her. She created a scholarship fund for young people from underprivileged backgrounds who dreamed of studying law. She held free community workshops, teaching citizens their rights, determined that no one else would feel as powerless as she once had. Malik often sat in the front row, watching her speak to rooms packed with young faces, their eyes wide with possibility. "You don't have to accept the story others write for you," she would tell them. "You can write your own." At home one evening, Malik hugged her tightly. "You didn't just keep your promise, Mom," he said, his voice full of pride. "You changed everything." And Amara smiled, finally believing it. The woman, once mocked in handcuffs, now stood as a symbol of justice, resilience, and the unstoppable strength of dignity. They laughed when they cuffed her, certain she would remain powerless forever. But the same courtroom that once echoed with her humiliation now stood silent beneath her gavel. Amara Johnson proved that true justice doesn't come from mocking the weak. It comes from the courage to endure, to rise, and to face the very system that tried to break you. Her journey is more than one woman's victory. It's a reminder that no matter how deep the humiliation, no matter how heavy the silence, dignity can outlast arrogance. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one with the badge or the uniform, but the one everyone underestimates. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs courage today. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice, resilience, and the unstoppable power of the human spirit.